The movie begins with a young Eric Draven walking alone down a rural road, where the air is filled with the solitude and melancholy he is feeling. As he walks, he encounters a flock of birds and scares them away to protect an injured horse. This action allows us to see his protective nature. The boy tries to calm the horse and remove the wires that are hurting it, but in doing so, he injures his hands and is unable to save it. Here we witness his first encounter with pain. This scene intertwines with fragments of his future, where suffering becomes his constant companion. While this unfolds, we see his mother under the influence in the kitchen. The movie progresses, and we are introduced to Shelley, who has just received a call from her friend informing her that someone showed an incriminating video to someone else, a video we will learn more about later. This video features her friend, and another acquaintance. At that moment, we can only hear screams in the background, and they discuss how to use the video to their advantage. Sadie and Shelley decide to leave that place and take their friend with them. However, when Sadie attempts to execute her plan, a man and a woman suddenly appear and take her away. Shelley, instead of deleting the video, saves it in a safe place and leaves her house to meet her friend. Unfortunately, her attempt is thwarted when she trips into a police officer, causing drugs to fall out of her bag, and the officer takes her away. The scene changes, and we see Eric, now covered in tattoos, taking a shower. Eric now lives in a rehabilitation center, where he is constantly mistreated for being a quiet and shy boy, while he relives painful memories from his past. After that tragic event, he became very hardened and aggressive, which is why he is in therapy. Later, by chance, we see that they bring Shelley to the same place where Eric is. Soon, we are introduced to Vincent, followed by a girl who approaches him to talk about his musical talent, because apparently, he is looking for girls with musical abilities. However, he is interrupted by his assistant named Marion, who tells him that they have found the girl, referring to Sadie, Shelley's friend. He immediately goes to see her and asks her to stay calm. He explains that they are looking for her friends, especially Shelley. He asks her about Shelley's location, but doesn't give him any information because she knows he is a bad guy. Vincent tells her that for not telling him, she will go to hell. He then approaches her, speaking in a slightly strange voice and casting what seems like a spell, causing her departure to the other world. The next day, Shelley approaches Eric for breakfast, but he reminds her of a rule that men and women cannot sit together. Despite this, they continue to talk and get to know each other. Their conversation is interrupted by a therapy session, but they keep seeing each other. Later, when Shelley plans to escape through a window, Eric decides to join her after learning that her visitors are lawyers who could endanger her. After their risky escape, Eric learns that the visitors are from Shelley's old life, which she keeps secret. They briefly stay at a friend's house, but since he's no longer there, they only have a place to crash occasionally. Shelley tells Eric he can leave if he wants, but he doesn't want to be apart from her, as they have quickly fallen in love. Their intimacy leads to a kiss, and they spend more time together, even bathing and asking each other personal questions. They share magical moments that teleport them to another world where they drink, dance, and kiss. As night falls, they discuss love, and Shelley encourages him to try to love her, which he promises to do. The next day they discover Sadie's body in the river, which puts Vincent in trouble. Marion informs him that he must eliminate any evidence against him, particularly a video that could implicate him. Meanwhile, Shelley and Eric enjoy their love, while hiding from others. As Shelley plays the piano, she recalls memories of her past, prompting her to step outside for a moment. She tells him that she hasn't played the piano for a long time, because she was so good at it that her mother took her to play in very inappropriate places for her age, where she didn't want to perform and saw very shady things she shouldn't have witnessed, and even did terrible things too. But she can't tell him that, because he would leave her if he knew. However, he reassures her that whatever happens, or whatever has happened, he will always be with her, and even if she decides to jump off a bridge, they will jump together. Finally, it seems that their love is real. Then they both go to a party and tire themselves the hell out. Afterward, they get thirsty and want some water. Shelley leaves him for a moment to get the water, but runs into her friend Dawn, who tells her that Sadie is deceased and that they need to leave town immediately. However, she doesn't want to leave without Eric, so she rushes back to get him out of the party and promises to tell him later. When they return to where they were staying, and Shelley is about to tell him, they meet the same guys who went to look for Shelley at the rehabilitation center. They immediately cover her and Eric with bags, and it seems like they can't take it anymore, and have already passed away. We leave them apparently heading to Limbo, or should we call it the Darkness, where Eric goes after Shelley to rescue her and almost drowns but arrives too late. Unfortunately, Shelley passes away immediately. Eric leaves the place to avoid drowning, but he can no longer see Shelley. He is lost in the darkness, walking alone and sad, listening to many voices that torment him until a guy stops to tell him that a raven carries his soul to the world of the non-living. But sometimes they make mistakes and leave his soul stagnant, which is why he will never be free. He does not tell him anything about who he is, but tells him that the raven will guide him to correct what is wrong. Eric believes that everything is a nightmare and refuses to believe the guy. so the guy decides to throw him so that he wakes up and thus returns to the world of the living. While he thinks about and remembers Shelley, he hears a voice. Well, an agent directed by Marion went to look for Shelley's phone because it contained something very important, and she must find it. This guy immediately hears Eric's presence and tells him that he can come out because he is a police officer. When he comes out, Eric mentions that he thinks he has gone crazy and can only think that something terrible happened to his girlfriend. He then asks a police officer for help, but it turns out that this officer is corrupt and works for Vincent, who ends up shooting Eric. Fortunately, Eric survives the gunshot, and they fight until the officer is taken out. Despite being wounded, Eric is badly hurt, and while he tends to his injuries, he begins to see illusions of Shelley jumping off a bridge, followed by him doing the same. Kronos reappears, and Eric asks what is happening and where Shelley is. Kronos responds that he won't like the answer, that she is going to a much worse place, and that the man who took their lives shouldn't be in his world. He made a pact with the devil, sending innocents to hell in exchange for eternal life. Kronos further explains that if Eric takes out him and those who work for him, Shelley will come back to life. Eric inquires about what happened when the police shot him. Kronos tells him that his body can feel pain, but he will not pass away as long as his love for Shelley remains pure in the mortal world. After this, Eric goes to see a friend who used to give him tattoos and asks for a weapon to seek revenge. Unsure where to start, Eric looks for Shelley's mother, whom he saw with Vincent's men at the rehabilitation center. The woman insists that Shelley didn't pass away at their hands, but from an overdose. Eric denies this, as he was there when the tragic event occurred. The woman hyperventilates, breaking things and screaming how her baby is not coming back. Eric leaves and checks Shelley's belongings, finding her old work pass. Continuing his investigation, Eric finds a man associated with Vincent. Before the man can reveal who he works for, Eric is forced to take him out. He takes the man's phone and discovers that the blonde woman working for Vincent is named Marion. Eric tracks her down and attempts to off her, but during the struggle, he is violently thrown from the vehicle and hit by a truck. While he recovers thanks to his powers, Vincent visits Shelley's mother and informs her that a boy who came back to life is searching for him. He believes that by offing the boy, he can bring Shelley back, and he whispers something in the woman's ear. In the next scene, she jumps from her apartment. Vincent then tells Marion to capture the boy and bring him because he wants to speak with him. Eric seeks out Dom, who assures him he is a friend of Shelley and wants to warn him about the danger she was in the night Eric saw him approach her at the party. Eric lets Dom go in exchange for information, and Dom reveals that Vincent is behind everything because of a video he recorded, saying he shouldn't have done it. This video is the source of all the problems. Eric enters Shelley's friend's apartment, finds her phone, and watches the video, which shows Shelley playing the piano when Vincent gives her a dagger and whispers something in her ear. Under the influence of evil, Shelley rises and takes out another girl who is with them. Eric cannot believe what he sees and goes to tell his friend that Shelley did something terrible that he cannot get out of his mind. His search leads him to a breaking point, claiming he is giving up and can't take it anymore. His friend tries to calm him, but Vincent's men arrive and off him. They attempt to capture Eric, shooting him in the abdomen, and he collapses wounded in a bathtub. Not fully recovered, Eric returns to Kronos, who explains that his love has ceased to be pure because he started having doubts about Shelley after seeing the video, which caused him to lose his powers and pass away. Kronos offers him a second chance, but this time it's the soul of Eric for Shelley's. As crows start to emerge and attack Eric, Kronos makes a cut on his hand and does the same to Eric, sharing his black blood with him. He tells Eric that he will now be able to move between worlds and sends him to correct the injustices. Eric awakens in the bathtub and takes out Vincent's men. He dresses and goes to find Vincent. Vincent talks with Marion, who tells him that Eric has been taken out and that they will not be able to capture him alive. As Vincent enters an opera house, Eric arrives at the same location and begins offing all of Vincent's men. Marion learns that Eric is there and calls Vincent to inform him. Vincent simply thanks her. Just then, Eric appears, takes out the man with Marion, and then confronts her. She tells Eric that Vincent is not there, that he is at his mansion, but Eric takes her out and stands on stage with her head and that of the man he took out, throwing them into the panicking audience. Eric then goes to the bridge he crossed with Shelley, leaving white lilies as she wanted. Finally, face to face with Vincent, he tells Eric that there is no salvation for Shelley, that she is not who he thought she was. Eric refuses to believe it, asserting that Vincent made her act that way with his powers. The villain replies that you cannot corrupt the void. He only brings forth the evil that is already inside. Vincent attacks Eric and tries to mix his blood with Eric's, but Eric pushes him into a mirror, and both fall into an abandoned station, continuing to fight. Eric submerges Vincent in a puddle, from which hands emerge to pull him away. Shelley appears and embraces Eric. He explains that he exchanged his soul for hers, and that this is their goodbye. They both cry, and sadly, Eric passes away. The man who seemed to have helped Eric in the darkness tells Shelley that Eric fought hard for her. Now Eric says his farewell, clarifying that his love will live on in everything she does, and that he is sure their souls will reunite one day. Until then, all he has left is the memory of the perfect feeling of loving her, and sometimes that is more than enough.